Have you ever wondered why is it that everything could be going good, but you focus on the one thing that's not? Maybe you've got all of this amazing feedback, but you get stuck or caught up on the one that maybe wasn't so amazing or a little bit negative. And maybe it ruins your day. It ruins you for days, maybe even for weeks. You're just replaying and thinking that one negative piece of feedback or that one criticism. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and they recently put on an event, and so many people had an amazing time at this event. They got all sorts of feedback, but there were a couple people, and there's always a couple. There's always a couple haters. If you don't have at least a couple haters, you're probably not living up to your potential. You're probably not, being all that you could be. But there's always a couple that had, they had a couple negative things to say, or at least not so great things to say. And he was like, it's like my mind just hones in and focuses in on those two negative things. And I think about it for days or weeks. And that's kind of what happens, right? Some of us, sometimes when we get that criticism or that feedback, we try to rationalize it. We wrestle with it for days. We replay it. We beat ourselves up with it. And we completely overlook all of the other good things. And so we're just absolutely drained from focusing on this one negative thing. So how do you stop doing that? Well, I think to really dig into how you stop doing it, we have to talk about why it happens in the first place. Now, a lot of people will say, and this is true to an extent, that we're wired to focus on negativity. We're wired to scan for a potential threat. And I believe that's kind of a distortion. And what I mean by that is I don't believe that's how we were created. Originally, we were created to bear the image of God, and originally we were created to be in relationship with God, in conversation with God, and to rest in our relationship and conversation with God, knowing who we are and knowing that we are enough, more than, right? And so what's really going on when we get hijacked by this one negative comment or criticism or feedback or whatever is it's kind of poking on this really deep, almost old wound that we all kind of carry in some level. And it's, am I okay as I am? Am I enough as I am? And we were created with the intention to know that and to walk in that. And yet, all of us deal with the pain that comes with not doing that, but instead choosing to walk in comparison, choosing to walk in questioning, choosing to walk in letting the world define us and tell us who we are and who we're not, versus seeing ourselves through God's eyes. Eve in the Garden of Eden was given an option to stay in that rest and in that surrender, or to reach for control over that and to self-determine who she was and who she wasn't, so and I see that's typically the source and the root of what happens when we get caught up on all of the negative. It's because we're not recognizing that we are valid and we are enough already as is. But instead we're falling into the trick of believing what's going on out there in terms of how our worth is determined. But anyways, I don't want to get too far off into the deep end about that. I do want to talk about, how do you shorten the time? Maybe you're someone who identifies as like a recovering people pleaser, Someone who's always trying to make other people happy or cares too much about what other people think. If that's you, let's talk about how do you shorten the time to where maybe when someone gives you a gives you negative feedback or a criticism, it doesn't sideline you for days, or you don't have to spend so much time in your head wrestling with it, but instead you can just take it in, see it for what it is, and move on. That's what I want to talk about. And the insight that I offered with my friend, this is part number 1 of how to just not have it consume you, the negativity or that one bad thing, is you have to have a framework that serves as a filter, because you can't just be taking in everyone's feedback, ideas, opinions. There has to be a filter. So you have to create a framework for yourself that determines, that clearly outlines, and you got to write it down on paper, that clearly outlines what feedback is valid and what feedback absolutely is not. And getting clear on what valid feedback looks like to you and for you, and what isn't. And that kind of serves as a buffer. That kind of serves as a filter, so that when stuff starts to come in, you have this tangible thing that you can run it against and be like, you know what? That ain't it. I don't need to really worry about that. But and we have to do that because we have to slow down the body reaction that happens. We have to create a buffer so that we can stay in our right sound mind and maintain a level of discernment. But what happens if you don't have this filter in place, if you don't have this framework in place for yourself, what happens is you're just taking it in, and it comes right in, and it hits that wound inside of us all that lives, that's like, am I enough? Am I okay as I am? That comes into question for us, and then we're our mind is off to the races, right? But to slow that process down, if not stop it entirely, we have to really get super clear on what is feedback that we're going to allow, that we're going to take in, and what isn't. Who are the people, that we're going to take it from, or not, right? Now, that's just like one tactical thing. The second thing, which is a bit more spiritually involved and is kind of a journey and a process and can take some time, is we have to do a better job at giving ourselves grace and looking at ourselves the way that God looks at us. We have to ask ourselves, what would God say about this? We have to give ourselves the type of grace that God gives us and has always given us, the type of grace that allows us to mess up over and over and over again and fall short over and over and over again, and still get to live another day, still get to take another breath, still get to have another opportunity, a new day. That's what we have to do. And when we start to focus on that, really what we're doing is we're shifting our focus on God. We're shifting our focus on things that are more God-like. And when we do that, there's just not as much room within us, not as much opportunity inside of us to fall into the trap of thinking we're anything less than, into thinking that we're not enough. Because that's what's at the core of getting so caught up in what someone else's criticism or feedback is. It's just this disconnection from recognizing who we are in God's eyes. Hopefully this helps you. My name is Sid Scott, if you didn't know that already, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.